the issues that has not come up as of yet in Parliament, and one assumes and hopes that it will be discussed in great detail over the next few days, is the issue of what is happening to the Indian economy. And here on ET Now and the India Development Debate, we're keeping ourselves sharply focused on this. So here's what's happened today. Retail inflation numbers are out today at 6.69%. It is a slight easing from last month because July's numbers were revised to 6.73%. But that really doesn't matter. I mean, 7% was expected. It's neither here nor there. It's just way too much. It's way too much for where the economy is right now. It's way too much for the Reserve Bank of India's comfort level. And to top it off, it's coming at a time when growth is still extremely timid and tepid. In fact, forecast for growth is also not looking great. S&P became the latest global agency to predict an increased contraction in growth for this financial year. They predicted minus 5%. Earlier, they've increased that to minus 9%. They're not the only ones. Several agencies have done that in the last week, and that range is from 9% to up to 14% as far as Goldman Sachs is concerned. So we need to talk about a few things. What really is going on? Why are the projections getting worse despite unlock, despite one whole set of booster shots and reform measures of 20 lakh crore rupees, which were announced by the government a few months ago? Is that not working? Where are the pain points? And to speak on this, I'm joined now by Pranab Sen, former member of the Planning Commission. I'm speaking with D.K. Joshi, Director-in-Chief Economist at CRISIL, and Yamini Iyer, President and Chief Executive at the Center for Policy Research. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for speaking with us on this show today. Yamini, let me come to you first, just to sort of set the tone on what is really happening. Very simply put, I want you to explain to us first why all of these agencies are increasing their forecast of how badly the Indian economy will do.
Well, frankly, just as the numbers on the Indian economy are looking grim, so are the numbers on the public health challenge that has caused the Indian economy to contract in this way. And I think that combined is clearly indicating that the place where we are in today is likely going to continue, if not worsen, as far as the public health challenge is concerned. And even as India is unlocking, the nature of that unlock is not exactly a smooth one. There isn't clarity if you just take the health story itself, there isn't clarity on what kind of responses government is going to have as numbers increase. We still have sporadic lockdowns taking place in different states, in different locations, all of which have a disruptive impact on different aspects of the economy, particularly on the supply chain and the movement of labor. Added to this, I think that you pose this question about the booster shots. The fact of the matter is that the booster shots have not been enough. It's not entirely clear when the next booster shot is going to come and in what form. Every second day there's talk about fiscal stimulus of all kinds and all forms. But you can't, I think, continue without a clear projection from government about what its estimates are about how bad things are and how long it expects to see things. We don't really have a clear pathway from government in terms of where it's going to go forward. And many of the booster shots that were given, particularly in May and then again in June, July, as far as sort of pushing demand to some extent and particularly addressing the challenge of the poorest and the informal workers who were most badly affected, are now reaching their limit, and it's not clear what's going to happen. So the things that were helping the rural economy, Narega, for example, we are soon going to run out of funds there without more money. Universalization of the public distribution system still remains a pipe dream, and we are still trying to figure out what's going to happen on the urban front. Some talk of urban employment guarantee program in the air, but nothing clear. And I think that lack of clarity remains a problem. And last, not least, the fact that states still don't know how they are going to meet the revenue shortfall and what kind of support they are going to get, if at all, from the central government, adds to that overall sentiment of lack of clarity, which means that consumer sentiment is down, investment sentiment is down, and overall, I don't think things are going to change, unless the government starts showing more confidence in the direction it's going to take.
So that uncertainty is now being reflected in all of the downward forecasts. So Moody's has revised its forecast to minus 11.5%, Fitch to 10.5%, Goldman Sachs to minus 14.8%. Mr. Joshi, Crystal itself has revised its forecast recently to about 9%. Can you tell us what are the factors that are taken into account? What is looking worse today than it was 2 months ago after unlocking has taken place? And the average Indian has figured out how to survive and live with coronavirus, but clearly the economy is not reflecting that trend.
Well, I think we minus to minus 9%. And I think that's not because the first quarter GDP came in at minus 24%. We had projected minus 25. So that was not the surprise element for us. I think the main reasons are, one is the unfettered spread of coronavirus. It is moved from the urban areas to the rural areas to the smaller towns, which were doing well. I think some of the data that comes out of rural India showed that it was not hit as much as the urban areas. And now I think with the spread of coronavirus there in the areas where you have weak infrastructure, and I think there is if the virus doesn't peak out soon, then it could also interfere with the harvesting season, which is in October. So I think that's reason number one. The reason number two is we had factored in earlier that a fiscal stimulus of 1% of GDP above what was announced would come forth, and that did not materialize. So that was reason number two. And a minor reason, I think, compared to these two is the inflation, which we were expecting would trend down. Central bank was also expecting it to come down, hasn't come down. So that restricts the monetary policy, which was doing the heavy lifting till now to cut rates and support the economy. I think these are the three reasons for bringing the economic growth down to minus 9%.
All right. We'll take a very short break over here, but when we come back, I'm going to speak with Professor N.R. Bhanumurthy and Pranab Sen, who in fact for Q1 thinks that the GDP may have contracted even more than 24%. We'll take a very short break and be right back. We're talking about the Indian economy and trying to understand why people are still speaking about a V-shaped recovery. What does that really mean? And why are we seeing an estimate of an increased contraction by all global agencies months after we have seen an economic package put out by the government? One of the reasons perhaps is the surge in coronavirus cases. We're at about 48.5 lakhs, growing at a lakh a day. Pranab Sen is now with us. Mr. Sen, you had estimated, if I'm not mistaken, that Q1 GDP is actually even worse than the minus 24% that is being put out. What do you put that down to?
The principal reason is because these quarterly estimates of GDP have no way of picking up the damage that has happened to the informal sector. And the informal sector, mind you, accounts for about 27-28% of the economy. Now, what is done in these quarterly estimates is that you use the organized sector data as a proxy for the informal. But I think the general consensus is the informal sector has been hit much worse than the formal sector has. So if that is the case, and if the formal sector itself is going down by 24%, then you should expect the informal to go down by more. So if you make that adjustment, the numbers start looking a lot worse.
Professor Bhanumurthy, the informal sector and the pain of the informal sector is something that S&P also says in its note today. They also talk about MSMEs getting very badly hit. But even employment, if I look at employment as one of the factors which seem to have been improving June, July onwards, and if I go by CMIE data, is looking tough again in August. Why do you think we're slipping back? It was quite apparent that, the economy would do badly because of COVID-19. The global economy has. The lockdown was severe, so that in a part explains the Q1 numbers. What is this July to August slip, and which seems to be going into September as well? Can you hear me, Professor Bhanumurthy? All right, I don't think he can hear me. Let me take that question to DK Joshi. Why do you think we seem to be getting worse instead of better?
Well, I think the economic data, the high frequency economic data, which nowadays also includes unconventional indicators like Google mobility, etc. I think that is showing that after we hit June, I mean, April onwards till June, there was a sharp lift. I mean, because you suddenly opened up after nearly 2 months of a complete lockdown. After that, the recovery in most indicators have been very wobbly. I think you can, even if you look at power consumption, it goes up and comes down. I think most of the indicators are showing up and down. I think as Yamini was telling earlier, I mean, it was because of the non-uniform nature of the lockdown. And I think some parts reimposed lockdowns to some extent. Although there is opening up overall, I think the synergies between different parts of the economy cannot be utilized unless you have a uniform opening up. So I think that is also getting partly reflected in the kind of economic activity that we are seeing. So I think I would say that we probably are 85 to 90% economy at the juncture. I mean, you are below where you should be, and it was a 75% economy in the first quarter. I think you've improved from that, but I think still the recovery is very wobbly. Until you have a firm control over the virus, you will keep seeing these ups and downs. I mean, you will not see a uniform improvement in the output.
Yamini, I want to come to you on that part. I mean, we are, and there is no doubt about it, we are hurtling towards the 50 lakh mark. We are almost at the 100,000 new cases per day. But the one message which keeps coming is that look at the fatality rates. The fatality rates are low. If you take the sero studies in account and assume, that more people have actually got COVID than is officially known, then the fatality rates go down even lower. The case being made in that point is then let's just open up because fewer people are dying relatively. Do you think that's really then the way forward?
Well, look, I mean, we have very clearly made intriguing calls. We decided to go from a policy perspective into a very severe top-down lockdown at a very early stage, where everything was being driven by Home Ministry through the NDMA, Government of India. When we started opening up, in fact, it almost felt like Government of India was moving away. As somebody who believes that states should take the front, are at the front line and should take these decisions, I was glad for that. But once you start opening up like that, you actually need the national government to step in even more to create the coordination mechanisms, so that precisely the kind of challenges when some states are going into lockdown and others are opening up, borders need to be open and closed, etc., for the supply chains to be smoothened out, especially after what you learned in the early part of the lockdown. I mean, to me, the most vivid of these stories is that procurement in Punjab hit a roadblock because the jute textile mills in West Bengal were shut, so there were no gunny sacks to be had when, during procurement season. India is deeply interconnected. Once we started opening up, actually the national government should have taken a much more important role in creating coordination mechanisms across states. I think that would have helped smoothen things out and also infuse a sense of confidence in business as things were beginning to open and for them to get a better sense of visibility of what was going to happen going forward. Secondly, it's very important to also remember the nature of this disease is such that it actually keeps you out of the workforce for a very long period of time. There is a combination of 14 days isolation. The disease itself can be very severe. It may not be fatal, but it certainly weakens you. And there's also been a closing down of the health system for all other aspects of India's healthcare over these last 6 months. So there's probably a piling up of other diseases too that we're not tracking well enough. Much of India's workforce falls into poverty with one income shock related to health. So there are lots of other things that are happening that our current data systems are probably not good enough at catching, which is what is causing overall a depletion of workforce in the economy, a breakdown in the supply chains that we don't fully understand, and absent coordination and absent a long-term vision, it creates further depression in sentiment and confidence, which is the only thing that we need right now to be able to get. Basically, starting business today is a very risky proposition. Even a research center opening up like mine is a very risky proposition. Yeah. Imagine what it means when you're running a factory. You need the government to make you feel confident, and I think we're missing that at this point.
No, so how does the government make you feel confident? Let me come back to Mr. Pranab Sen, because, right now is already the time that people are speaking about a V-shaped recovery or an L-shaped recovery or, the first signs of green shoots. So relative to the months of April and May, everything is going to seem better because that was, on freeze mode. But from here on, I think the worries that are setting in is the patchiness of the recovery. Is that going to be the case till we have the numbers in control? Because we're nowhere in sight of having the numbers in control. Let's be honest, no one's even talking about flattening the curve anymore. That was a March, April slogan. It's out of the window right now.
Amana, let's at least get a few facts on the line. The first fact is that a 40-day lockdown did flatten the curve, and flattening the curve means you push the peak into the future to give you time to prepare for it. The only way you're going to flatten the curve again is by having another 40-day lockdown. Now, a 40-day lockdown has given you a minus 24% growth. Question is, does anyone want that repeated?
No.
That is really the conundrum that the government is facing. That's number one. But let's take this issue of green shoots that you talked about and V-shaped recovery. Tamanna, have you noticed that the government as of now has not yet come up with their projection as to what the economic growth in the current year will be? You've quoted, D.K. Joshi, you've quoted me, you've quoted several other people as coming up with projections. But the government, which has the maximum amount of information, a government which knows what it is planning to do, I hope, they have not come up with a projection. Now, that is really quite surprising. So when the government isn't telling me how are things going to be in the future, my level of uncertainty goes up. And the question I ask is, why aren't you telling me? But the interesting thing, of course, is the government can't wriggle out of this indefinitely because the Finance Commission is due to submit its report at the end of October. And the convention is that for the base year, which is 2021, the government of India has to give the Finance Commission an estimate of what the growth in that year is. So they're going to have to come out with it. But the longer you delay it, the greater the feeling you give people that the government doesn't know where we are going. The government doesn't have a game plan in place to take care of whatever are the emerging issues. And Yamini talked about the emerging issues in a substantive way. And this creates a much higher degree of uncertainty. So when you talked about, the uptick that took place in July, but particularly, remember, people got a sense of certainty. Lockdown is gone.
Yeah.
Right? After that, what has happened? The levels of uncertainty are continuously going up. Now, the question is that whose job is it to actually address the uncertainty issue? And the only entity that can do it is the government taken in its collective. So the point that Yamini was making is that this is a national problem. You need government at all levels to work synchronously. If people get the feeling that there is a tension, and now this is out in the complete open domain, that the center and states are fighting with each other over resources, it doesn't lead to any great confidence that the government is going to do what is necessary to turn the economy around. So this should come to no surprise.
No, so DK Joshi, how do you see all of this panning out? One question, of course, that Pranab Sen has asked is, do we know what we're doing? What is the game plan? The game plan that is apparent is to utilize this opportunity to fix some very basic problems that India has. And one of them is dependency on imports for certain key sectors. Let me not even bring in the whole, China context to it. But PLIs is one way that we're going. Production-linked incentives in various sectors. It seems to have worked well in mobile development, etc. Do you think that that's a good strategy to utilize? They say never let a good crisis go to waste. To utilize a crisis to fix long-standing issues.
Well, I think there's no harm in pursuing that. I think I'm all for reforms. I mean, if you use the crisis to do some fundamental structural reforms which enhance your efficiency, that's all good. But the truth with reforms is that they pay off with a lag. I mean, has even the GST or IBC haven't really paid off till now. So I think this is for creating a medium-term thrust to growth. That's fine, but I think the problem that is here and now, I think that also needs to be addressed. I mean, which essentially means, I think, providing more support to vulnerable households, and also I think the businesses which are debilitated because of their particular nature, but let's say in services, etc., they would also need some support. Otherwise, I think the risk is that you may lose the productive capacity going ahead, and that will constrain your medium-term potential anyway. I mean, so I think we do believe that this year is -9%. Even if you grow at 10% next year, which we have assumed, even then by 21-22, your GDP is just equal to 2019-20. So that's telling you, even with such a strong growth, you lose out 2 years, and that there's a huge amount of uncertainty what the growth path will be. But I think beyond that, I think there is a noise in this year's data, let's assume, and next year's also there could be a noise-driven recovery. But beyond that, I think the medium term, I think what happens there, I think for that, I think you need to act more proactively, I would say. I think on the reform front, on fixing others long-term issues, but also on fixing the issues which are here and now.
Right. Yamini, let me come to you on the plight of the informal sector, SMEs, MSMEs that have been talked about so much by this government during its plans and its policies that it unfolds, including easy credit, priority sector lending, etc., etc. Yet, report after report identifies this as the issue which is impeding any kind of recovery, because informal sector is hurt very badly. Are we doing enough, in your view, to focus on repairing this informal sector?
Well, to my mind, actually, this point is quite linked to what you were asking Mr. Joshi as well, in that, crises should not be wasted. We must reform. There's an unending long list of things that the Indian government needs to do to strengthen the economy. But really, this is the moment to focus on the repair. And we've talked extensively about the different, what is needed for that repair. And I think if you look at, what every single package announcement that has been coming from government since we went into the first severe lockdown, for the large part, the focus has been on let's not waste the crisis. There will be no opportunity to bank on if you don't repair now. And that's where I feel we haven't paid enough attention. There's a very important political economy element to this as well that we should talk about. All the so-called reforms are all being brought in through ordinances and through mechanisms that fundamentally upend critical elements of debate and discussion that are crucial if you want these reforms to actually have the kind of impact you are expecting it from the point of view of the country's growth. Think about the agricultural ordinances themselves. That, forget whether good, bad, ugly, it requires center-state coordination. Again, no debate, no discussion, imposition, closes off the opportunity. We're seeing farmer protests all over the country right now. So I think that, one must remember the real focus right now has to be on what will infuse confidence in key sectors of the economy to be able to repair. And part of that repair includes credit guarantee. I think some of that has begun. We also need to be thinking about some kind of wage subsidy to the through the MSMEs, to informal workers, most of whom are employed, particularly in the small and micro, and some greater impetus to Narega, greater impetus to perhaps an urban employment program, and more public investment. The answers are clear. There's enough talk about it. It's really for the government to say, we just have to do it.
Well, let's just do it, because there is no time to waste. It is looking bleak right now, and we know we need at least another year to recover. Now, projections for the next financial year are coming up to a growth of 10% from this base. That means it would be net in just about one more year after this. And then we can hope to improve from there on. We'll be keeping our focus on the economy right here. But for now, thank you so much to all of you for joining us on this big debate on the India development debate.